Atlantic City, New Jersey. The Convention Hall, June 7, 1993. Monday night, 9:45 in the evening. The casino floor below is still buzzing with slot machines and card tables, but up here in the arena, something else is happening. Something that was supposed to be a formality, a showcase, a carefully orchestrated step in the rebuilding of a fallen icon. Instead, it has become something nobody predicted. 12,500 people packed into seats that smell of cigar smoke and spilled beer. The ring, elevated in the center of it all, illuminated by television lights that make everything look both more real and more theatrical than it actually is. This is HBO boxing. This is prime time. This is supposed to be a statement fight. And for the first 9 rounds, it has been exactly that. But now, in the 10th round, something has changed. Something that is making the commentators pause, making the crowd lean forward, making the people who thought they knew how this night would end suddenly question everything. Tommy Morrison stands in the red corner, 24 years old, 6 feet 2 inches, 222 pounds of lean, sculpted muscle that looks like it was carved by a Hollywood casting director. Because that is exactly what most people believe he is. A product, a marketing creation, a white fighter with a famous last name, and a pretty face who was built up by promoters to sell tickets, not to fight real contenders. Tommy Morrison, the alleged great-nephew of John Wayne, though even that lineage is disputed by some. Tommy Morrison, who appeared in Rocky V as Tommy Gunn, the young, hungry fighter who turned on his mentor. Tommy Morrison, whose highlight reels show him demolishing overmatched opponents with devastating left hooks and combinations that look more like movie choreography than actual boxing. 38 wins, 1 loss, 33 knockouts. Impressive numbers. But who did he actually beat? The boxing media has been asking that question for 2 years. They call him the Duke, after his supposed connection to John Wayne. They show clips of his knockouts on sports shows. They put him on magazine covers. But behind closed doors, in the gyms where real fighters train, in the press rooms where writers who have covered this sport for decades gather, they dismiss him. He is a creation, a great white hope built for the pay-per-view era. A body built in a weight room, not a boxing ring. A puncher with no defense, no ring IQ, no ability to think under pressure. He has never been tested, never fought anyone who could hit back with equal power, never been in a real war. And tonight was supposed to prove all of that. Because in the blue corner, across 12 feet of blood-spattered canvas, is George Foreman. 44 years old, 257 pounds of hard-earned experience and legitimate heavyweight power. The same George Foreman who knocked out Joe Frazier in Jamaica. The same George Foreman who terrified an entire generation of heavyweights in the 1970s with his crushing, methodical destruction of opponents. The same George Foreman who lost to Muhammad Ali in the Rumble in the Jungle, then disappeared from boxing for 10 years, then came back in 1987 as a different kind of fighter. Slower, older, heavier, but smarter, more patient, more dangerous in some ways because he understands timing now in ways the young George never did. He has spent 6 years working his way back up the rankings, fighting carefully selected opponents, winning by knockout or decision, proving that age is not always a barrier in a sport where power is the last thing to go. And 3 months ago, George Foreman knocked out a legitimate contender in 90 seconds with a single right hand that sent shockwaves through the division. That knockout earned him this fight, this HBO showcase, this chance to prove he deserves a title shot. Tommy Morrison was supposed to be the next step, the young, marketable champion in waiting who would be exposed by a true legend. George would break him down with that legendary power. Tommy would crumble under real pressure. The boxing world would nod knowingly. We told you so. He was never real. Just another manufactured product. The odds makers agreed. George Foreman opened as the favorite, despite being 20 years older. The commentators agreed. Before the fight, Larry Merchant said on air, "Morrison has looked spectacular against limited competition, but tonight we find out if he is a real fighter or just a really good athlete." The boxing writers agreed. One headline the morning of the fight read, "Foreman to test if Morrison is marketing or might." Even Tommy's own promoter was nervous. In the dressing room before the fight, he told Tommy, "You don't have to win, pretty. You don't have to prove anything. Just survive. Just get through it. Protect yourself, and we will rebuild." Tommy did not respond. He just stared at the wall, wrapped hands resting on his knees, breathing steadily. The first 3 rounds went exactly as the experts predicted. George Foreman walked forward like a man who had done this 1,000 times before. No wasted movement, no unnecessary risks, just pressure. Steady, suffocating pressure. His jab was not fast, but it was heavy. Each one landed with the weight of his entire body behind it. Tommy tried to use his speed advantage, tried to circle, to move laterally, to make George chase him, but the ring is only so big, and George knows how to cut off the ring. He knows how to herd a younger fighter into corners, how to make space feel smaller than it is. In the second round, George landed a right hand that caught Tommy on the side of the head. Not a perfect shot, but solid enough. Tommy's legs wobbled for just a moment. The crowd gasped. George pressed forward, smelling blood. But Tommy clinched, tied him up, bought himself 10 seconds to recover. The referee separated them. George smiled. That knowing smile of a predator who has wounded his prey and knows the end is inevitable. Round 4. Round 5. Round 6. The pattern continued. George walking forward. Tommy trying to move, trying to box, trying to use combinations to slow George down. But George absorbed everything. His defense was simple but effective. High guard, shoulders rolled forward, chin tucked. He has been hit by harder punchers than Tommy Morrison. He knows how to take a shot. And every time Tommy committed to a combination, George would counter with single, massive punches. Right hands that came from somewhere deep, somewhere primal. Each one landed with a sound that echoed through the arena. Thud. The sound of leather on bone. The sound of power accumulated over a lifetime of training. By the end of round 6, Tommy's left eye was swelling. His face was marked. His corner was urgent. "You are losing this fight," his trainer said between rounds. "You need to take chances. You need to hurt him, or this is over." Tommy nodded, spit blood into the bucket. "I know." Round 7. Tommy came out differently. No more boxing, no more movement. He stood his ground and traded. For the first time in the fight, he made George respect his power. A left hook caught George on the jaw. George's head snapped to the side. The crowd roared. Tommy followed with a right hand, then another left hook. George covered up, but Tommy kept coming. For 90 seconds, Tommy Morrison fought like his career depended on it, because it did. He landed combinations that would have knocked out most heavyweights. George took every shot and fired back. They stood in the center of the ring and exchanged punches with the kind of violence that makes people wonder why anyone would choose this life. The round ended with both fighters breathing hard, faces marked, respect earned. The crowd was on its feet. This was no longer a showcase. This was a war. Round 8 belonged to George. He came out with renewed purpose. walked through Tommy's punches and landed a right uppercut that lifted Tommy off his feet for a split second. Tommy went down, not knocked out, not hurt badly, just off balance, surprised by the timing. He took a knee, looked up at the referee, nodded. The referee counted. 1, 2, 3. Tommy rose at 4. The referee wiped his gloves, checked his eyes, let the fight continue. George came forward for the finish. This was his moment. The moment he had been waiting for. The moment when the young manufactured fighter would crumble under the weight of real championship pressure. George threw everything. Right hands, left hooks, uppercuts. Tommy covered up, moved, survived. The bell rang. Tommy walked back to his corner with his hands raised, shouting at George. "That all you got?" It was bravado. It was desperation. It was also truth. Because Tommy was still standing. Round 9. The commentators were talking about Tommy's heart, about how, even though he was losing, even though he had been knocked down, he was not quitting. Larry Merchant said, "Morrison may not win this fight, but he is earning respect. He is showing he belongs." That was the narrative forming. Tommy would lose, but he would lose honorably. He would prove he was not just marketing. He could take punishment. He could survive. That would be enough. That would rebuild his reputation. But in the corner between rounds 9 and 10, something changed. Tommy's trainer leaned in close. "You are not going to win a decision. The judges have this for George. You need a knockout. You need to take everything you have ever learned, everything you have ever trained for, and put it into the next 9 minutes. This is your career. This is your legacy. Right now." Tommy looked at his trainer, blood running from his swollen eye, breathing hard through his mouth guard. And he nodded, not the nod of desperation, the nod of understanding. Round 10. Tommy Morrison came out of his corner with a different energy. Not wild, not reckless, controlled, purposeful. George felt it. You can see it in the broadcast if you watch closely. George's posture changed slightly. He became more cautious. For 9 rounds, he had been the aggressor, the hunter. But now something in Tommy's eyes was different. Tommy feinted with his jab. George brought his guard up. Tommy threw the jab again, this time committing. It snapped George's head back. Before George could reset, Tommy stepped to the left, changed the angle, and threw a left hook to the body. The punch landed perfectly, right under George's ribs, right where the liver sits, protected only by muscle and willpower. George grunted. His right arm dropped slightly, instinctively protecting the spot. That was the opening Tommy needed. He stepped in, threw a right uppercut that split George's guard and caught him on the chin. George's head snapped back. His legs stiffened. For the first time in the fight, George Foreman looked hurt. The crowd exploded. Tommy did not celebrate. He pressed forward. This was not about one punch. This was about breaking down a legend, piece by piece, second by second. Tommy worked the body again. Left hook, right hook, left hook. Each punch landed with precision. George tried to tie him up, but Tommy pushed him away. "Ref, keep him off me," George said, his voice strained. The referee nodded but did not intervene. This was boxing. Tommy kept coming. He threw a combination to the head. Jab, jab, right hand, left hook. The last punch caught George on the temple. George's knees buckled. He did not go down, but he grabbed Tommy, clinched desperately. The referee separated them. George backed into the ropes. Tommy followed. He threw a left hook that missed, a right hand that George blocked, then another left hook. This one landed flush on George's jaw. George's mouthpiece flew out. Spit and sweat sprayed into the lights. George stumbled sideways along the ropes. The referee jumped in. He grabbed Tommy, pushed him back. He looked at George. George was standing, but his eyes were glassy. The referee waved his hand in front of George's face. "George, can you continue?" George nodded, but it was not convincing. The referee made a decision. He waved his arms. Fight over. Stoppage. 2 minutes, 54 seconds of round 10. Tommy Morrison stood in the center of the ring, arms raised, screaming. Not in triumph, in validation, in relief, in proof. George Foreman leaned against the ropes, mouthpiece being replaced by his corner, looking at Tommy with something between respect and disbelief. The crowd was chaos. Half of them were celebrating Tommy's victory. Half were stunned that George Foreman, the same man who terrified a generation, had just been stopped by the fighter they had all dismissed as a marketing product. The HBO commentators were scrambling to reframe the narrative. Jim Lampley said, "Ladies and gentlemen, we have just witnessed the emergence of a legitimate heavyweight contender. Tommy Morrison just did what nobody thought he could do. He stood toe-to-toe with George Foreman, absorbed his best punches, and stopped him. This was not marketing. This was real." Larry Merchant added, "I have covered this sport for 30 years. I thought I knew what Tommy Morrison was. I was wrong. What we just saw was a fighter who refused to quit, who learned during the fight, and who found a way to win when winning seemed impossible." In the ring, the referee raised Tommy's hand. Tommy climbed the turnbuckle, shouted at the crowd, beat his chest. His face was swollen, his eye nearly shut, his body covered in welts from George's punches. He looked like he had been in a war. He had, and he won. George Foreman walked over, extended his glove. Tommy took it. George pulled him close, spoke into his ear. "You earned this. You are a real fighter. Don't let anyone tell you different." Tommy nodded, emotion overtaking him. The two men embraced. The cameras captured it. That image, that moment of a legend acknowledging the legitimacy of the young fighter everyone dismissed, became the defining image of the fight. After the fight, in the press room, the questions came fast. Tommy sat at a table, ice pack on his eye, still breathing hard. A reporter asked, "Tommy, you have been called a marketing product, a manufactured fighter. What do you say to your critics tonight?" Tommy looked at the camera. "I say watch the tape. I just went to war with George Foreman, one of the greatest heavyweights of all time. I did not run. I did not quit. I stood in front of him, and I broke him down. If that is marketing, then I guess marketing hits pretty hard." The room laughed. Another reporter asked, "What changed in round 10? You looked different." Tommy thought about it. "I stopped trying to survive. I stopped fighting George's fight. I made him fight mine. I used my speed, my combinations, my body work. I boxed. I did not just punch. And when you box, when you think, when you use everything you have been trained to do, you find openings, even against a legend." George Foreman held his own press conference. He was honest in a way that only legends can afford to be. "Tommy Morrison beat me tonight, fair and square. He hit me with shots I did not see coming. He hurt me. That boy can fight. I do not care what anyone says. He is not a marketing product. He is a fighter, and he has a future in this sport." The boxing media, the same media that had dismissed Tommy for 2 years, changed their narrative overnight. The next morning, the headlines read differently. "Morrison proves doubters wrong. The Duke earns his name. Tommy Morrison is real." The fight became a reference point. When critics said he was manufactured, people said, "Did you see the Foreman fight?" When people questioned his heart, they said, "He got up from a knockdown and stopped George Foreman 3 rounds later." The fight did not just change Tommy's reputation. It changed how people thought about what it means to be a real fighter. Because the truth that nobody wanted to admit is that Tommy Morrison was both. He was marketed, he was promoted, he was put in favorable matchups early in his career. He was used to sell tickets and magazines. All of that is true. But he was also a fighter, a real fighter who trained, who learned, who adapted, who refused to quit when quitting would have been easier. The two things are not mutually exclusive. You can be a product and still be real. You can be marketed and still earn your place. Tommy Morrison's career after that night had its highs and lows. He won the WBO heavyweight title. He lost it. He fought Ray Mercer in a brutal war that some still call one of the greatest heavyweight fights of the 1990s. He tested positive for HIV in 1996 and was banned from boxing. He spent years denying the diagnosis, fighting in unsanctioned matches, living a life that seemed determined to self-destruct. He died in 2013 at age 44, his potential never fully realized, his legacy complicated by choices made outside the ring. But on June 7, 1993, in Atlantic City, in front of 2,500 witnesses and millions watching on HBO, Tommy Morrison proved something that no marketing campaign could manufacture. He proved that heart is real, that adaptation is real, that a fighter can be underestimated, dismissed, written off, and still find a way to win when it matters most. George Foreman never fought for a world title after that night. He continued his comeback for another 4 years, but the loss to Morrison took something from him. That aura of invincibility, that sense that age and power could overcome youth and speed, was shattered. Tommy Morrison took it from him in round 10 of a fight he was supposed to lose, and the boxing world reluctantly admitted they had been wrong. The marketing product they dismissed as fake became the fighter who stopped a legend. That fight changed his reputation forever.